And so then my own spiritual awakening started happening, and it really changed my sense of reality. Like my own intuition started opening up. I explored that like as a very separate personal exploration piece for a number of years.
Mhm.
As a registered like health professional, again, we are evident, like we're bound to evidence-based practices only, so you can't bring in just
Yep.
anything. So it was a long journey of developing those skills for myself, being like, this is real, but how do you make sense of it? How do you get stronger in this? How do you get stronger at interpreting it so it's
Hmm.
actually helpful versus when your rational mind's getting involved? And and then it was a number of years as well too to seek other training, like mentorship certification, to be able
Yeah.
to do it within psychology as well.
Hi, conscious parents. It's Carrie here, and I am here with a little info about raising our mindful kids. I've got some tips and tricks about breaking free of the box and becoming who you are and teaching your kids how to do that along the way. Join us. Hi there, and welcome back. I have a treat for you guys today. I have Mrs. Katie Turner here, who I love blends her background in psychology and child psychology and works with adults as well and brings in the holistic approaches. I love bringing in the holistic mindsets and pieces. And so, Katie, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been really lovely to connect with so many people that have these backgrounds. And I myself have the speech therapy and teacher background, and I love blending in some of the evidence-based things that I've seen and then some of these intuitive pieces that have been so prevalent in my life. I was going to ask you, how did you end up bringing in the holistic side for yourself and as a
Yeah, so
practitioner?
for me, it was a long journey. So I
Okay,
do like a
sure.
Cole's Notes version of it
Yeah.
basically. But my background psychology first. So Masters of Science in Psychology, more research, like
Mm,
evidence-based approaches. Didn't have a strong background growing up, anything like that. I thought a lot of the stuff was woo. If people believe in it, if it helps, great. But
yeah.
I unintentionally stumbled into my own spiritual awakening
Mm,
when I was early in the field and kind of burnt out and a bit
mm,
disillusioned with only the conscious mind focus alone, like the limitations I was seeing in the field.
okay.
And in hindsight, I was engaging in a lot of practices that actually do help open up that connection. I just didn't realize that
Mm,
at the time. So things like meditation, like energy work, breath work, like lots of meditation. And so then my own spiritual awakening started happening, and it really changed my sense of reality. Like my own intuition started opening up. I explored that like as a very separate personal exploration piece for a number of years.
mhm.
As a registered like health professional, again, we are evident, like we're bound to evidence-based practices only, so you can't bring in just
Yep.
anything. So it was a long journey of developing those skills for myself, being like, this is real, but how do you make sense of it? How do you get stronger in this? How do you get stronger at interpreting it so it's
Mhm.
actually helpful versus when your rational mind's getting involved? And and then it was a number of years as well too to seek other training, like
Mm,
mentorship certification, to be able
yeah.
to do it within psychology as well.
Wow,
Yeah,
I
I really
love
did.
that. Yeah, so you brought in some of those pieces as well. You got the certification in those areas as well. I love that. And so with connecting with your intuition, I love to talk about that with parents a lot. For just a little background, I was very in my head when I became a
Mhm.
mom and trying to do all the perfect things and live in the perfect box. I thought that would be what my kids need, and my kids really resisted it.
Yeah.
It was really cool. And that's when I had my spiritual awakening, which has continued. And I even grew up spiritual. So
Yes.
it's so easy, even when you're grown up with it, to get back
Mhm.
into your mind. Is there anything that you would tell parents as far as connecting with their intuition and what you've seen or what you feel like they could
Yeah.
hear?
I think there's just so many layers to it. I think one thing nobody really tells people, like you can go to the baby classes, you can get prepared, you can learn about parenting, all the things, but nobody
Yep.
tells you like actually becoming a parent is going to bring up your own stuff and bring access to your
Mhm.
own stuff in this very intensified way that if you
Yep.
weren't to become a parent, you probably wouldn't have it hit you as hard.
Yeah.
So there's always a bit of a balance of, okay, what if this is our own childhood stuff that's coming to the surface that like we're now in the adult
Yeah.
position, like processing it from a different way as we're also parenting. I think there's the piece of working with our actual nervous system and how our bodies and brains store more intense emotional experience differently than positive emotional experience is a big one
Mhm.
for parents, because it's not just about having the tools and being like, I want to talk to my kid like this or react this way. We all have trigger points where
Yeah.
it's our own nervous system to regulate and work with the triggers that come up for ourselves in parenting.
Mhm.
I also think like I work a lot with women. Women still are in our culture and society the main ones who seek out help and have less
Hmm.
stigma around that.
Interesting.
But I work with men as well too. And I think we can get so individualized of think it's our own personal problem of I'm being too hard on myself. I have all these impossible expectations as a mom, but it's so cultural and systemic. And like this time
Yeah.
period, I do a lot of work with cycle breakers, and there is this shadow side to it that people don't really talk about of like when you know, okay, there's epigenetic trauma, what we're passing down to our
Mhm.
kids, it can go so far to the other side of I don't want to do anything to screw them up
Mhm.
that it's paralyzing for people or there's a lot of shame with it.
Yep.
And I work with women so often carry these impossible standards of I'm not doing enough and this like
Yeah.
mom guilt, which isn't actually guilt. Like guilt is as a pure emotion is I've done something wrong or against my value system. And guilt is meant to motivate us to do better. Like if our kids steal or lie or throw something, if they feel guilty, it's not a bad thing. We're like, hey, that's good. You're not a psychopath. Let's work with that. Let's not go into shame or blame you, but be like, how do we move through this and actually apologize? What do we do differently next time?
Mhm.
Guilt has a purpose to it, but most moms, it's like this cultural shame. And women and moms carry that. And I've never seen a case of dad guilt in the way moms carry it.
Mhm.
Usually if they're coming men are coming into therapy with I don't feel good about this, it's okay, there's usually actually something going on. It's usually not this crushing societal weight of
Mhm.
impossible expectations of I should always be regulated, I should be having a career, I should be doing all these things with them, I should give them one-on-one attention all the time and never lose my
Yes.
temper.
Yes. Yeah.
I
That
think there's
makes.
all, and with the intuition piece, there's always sorting out all the external noise
Mhm.
and belief system stuff with what's actually true
Yeah. I feel like
intuition.
when we're building up that intuition piece, it does make it so much easier when you are feeling that triggered piece, like to connect with yourself and be like, what is triggering me right now? It's made it so much easier for me.
Yeah.
I'm a sensitive, highly sensitive person, and then
Hmm.
raising two highly sensitive kids. I'm married to a highly sensitive person.
Yeah.
We're
Highly
all
sensitive myself.
kumbayaing
Yeah.
over here. So I think just that intuitive piece, I'm starting to
Mm.
get to the point where I can hear it so much faster as I continue to build
Yeah.
it. Okay, this is this moment that is making me want to yell right now. Or,
Yeah.
yeah, is it a trauma piece for me? Or
Yeah.
is it simply like that I'm feeling overstimulated or the screaming is just
Hmm.
taking over?
Yeah.
My kid's screaming is too much for me. So it's really helpful in that way for me.
For sure. And I think that like mindfulness, like that awareness and self-reflection and what's going on in my internal world is a big one because
Mm.
pure intuitive information comes through our sensory. Like it comes in different ways. A lot of it's finding our dominant ability and like continuing to work with that.
Mhm.
It's usually easier when it's something that's not high stakes or like we have a lot of emotion invested in. So practicing with it, it's keep it light, have fun. We want
Mhm.
it for the bigger things of should I do this or that? Keep my kid in this school or stay with this pediatrician. But it's often harder to get that access when there's a lot of emotions involved. And that's where it is such a dynamic process of being like, hey, what's this bringing up for me? All
Mhm.
that old like belief system stuff, our own nervous system stuff, it's almost like static on the radio signal line. If we can,
Mhm.
the more we can clear that, the more just knowing
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
come in. And we need space to get out of our rational mind, like walks, meditation, something.
Yes, the space is so helpful. And like you said, we put so much pressure if we're trying to figure out something like changing their schools, which we went through
Hmm.
last fall, mid-year. We did have so much pressure and then it just shut us down and we got so
Yeah.
stuck where we couldn't hear. But
Yeah.
I think knowing it's not something, if it's going to happen, it will maybe you'll see
Mhm.
signs several times, or maybe it will continue to
It's always a
prolong.
process too. Sometimes we just want the answer. Our intuition doesn't follow our logical. Our ego mind is like, just tell me what to do. And intuition is more a process. It's more like, how do we feel moment by moment? I'll often compare it to almost like a GPS system or a compass, but it only tells you like turn left right now. It doesn't tell you like all the steps that are going to come up. So we often have to still be in the process, like talking to the school, being like, is there anything we can do? Let's give this a try. Let's start looking at other options. Let's go to their
Mhm.
open house because it's
Mhm.
all a feedback loop.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for us, it came 3 different times. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
it was like it just kept bombarding us. It was like,
Yeah.
this person said this, then my son said this. And it was,
Synchronicities.
yeah, yeah, it's nice. It's okay if you make the wrong decision, like you're still going
Oh
to
yeah,
have
the volume will
chances.
come up. It's not,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I love that because it
Yeah.
takes away some of that pressure. If I don't make it right now, we're gonna lose it or things
Yeah.
like so yeah. If is there a
Mhm.
piece that you would tell parents for kids that if parents want to help their kids to keep these conscious pieces, I feel like
Mhm.
my kids, I don't know about you, but so many kids and my kids have these
Mhm.
conscious pieces that they're born with and
Mhm.
these questions and wanting to connect with others and these pure hearts.
Mhm.
I really am focusing on trying to help my kids stay conscious into
Mhm.
adulthood.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's amazing. I think even just
Yeah.
that alone is like such a game changer because
Mhm.
it's a relatively new shift in parenting where emotional maturity, self awareness, self reflection, those aren't strong skills for most
Mhm.
of our parents' ancestors. If we go back a few generations, there was a lot of survival, there wasn't a
Yep.
lot of knowledge. We
Yep.
have the double edged sword of almost too much information and knowing what to sort through and not getting paralyzed by it. But it also is positive of at least there's options, at least there's tools. So for
Mhm.
anyone who's doing their own work and already aware of it, I'm not as worried for their kids because it's like if they know when their stuff's too big and they're going to get their own adult support for that. A lot of it too, I think, is like for sensitive kids, they pick up on so much of what's going on. And I think all kids do.
Mhm.
Um, so but the adults, if we're cut off from everything, if we're in our heads, if we're not connected to our own emotions, if we're not taking that responsibility for our own emotional regulation, maturity, it's like then kids, they get the message not to trust what they're sensing and feeling. So there's
Mhm.
a line of even really sensitive kids, it's you still need to be the adult. Even really psychic or gifted kids, don't ask them questions that are not developmentally appropriate for them, even if they get
Mhm.
answers and other pieces. It's go to someone else for that. It's not developmentally appropriate, even if they can
Wow.
channel or connect with other things. But I think the piece is like as an adult, we can validate of, yeah, I'm just stressed today, but it's not anything you're doing. So we can validate of, yeah, what you're picking up is correct, but still developmental appropriate boundaries. And the adults are in
Mhm.
charge
Yeah.
of doing this. And we can do our best to advocate for them, to help them get through situations. But parenting is almost like this ongoing, one of my mentors explained it as this ongoing baton relay toss, where you're constantly being like, am I holding the bar? Or and like, when is it time to pass it over to you? When do I have to let it go? When does your child have to
Mhm.
actually take it themselves? Because
Yeah.
as they get older, it's like, then we need to actually, it's not just about not doing anything that's going to traumatize them. We want to teach them resiliency as well and like how to
Mhm.
advocate and ways, be a guide to help them think about the world in a different way. Because I think it's like we didn't necessarily need the world to not be like to be completely accommodating of sensitivity and everyone getting it. But if there was
Yeah.
like one or two safe adults who could be like, oh, no, like it's not okay if an adult yells at you. Like you didn't do anything.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, maybe you should have been listening in class, but that's not an appropriate reaction. Like
Yeah.
it makes sense you feel upset. Like adults are responsible. Because I
Yeah.
was like into adulthood when I realized, oh, like not all adults are actually emotionally adults.
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
very true.
yeah.
We're all growing and changing. And yeah, I think that's an interesting piece because I think even as parents, we start to see our parents in a different view, right? And that's healing in itself as well. It comes
And
back in a
yeah, and
child.
triggering and healing. Like it's, yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. But
Yeah,
seeing as
yeah. Cycle
yeah.
breakers are often like in the middle, like gentle parenting their own parents and their kids, and are like, this is a lot. We need support systems too.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I hadn't thought about gentle parenting our own parents, but that is, yeah, instead of heart to heart parents, it's like heart to heart people connecting with everyone.
Yeah. When people
Yeah.
who are taking that, who are responsible for their own energy, who can reflect, who like to self-reflect, who are growth oriented, who are like working towards more emotional maturity. I think we need those networks,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
if they're just a few. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally I love that so much. And I think that that connection, like you said, having that person to turn to and being able to acknowledge what's going on in our kids' lives
Mhm.
and it gives them so many more tools in their pocket versus putting on these layers of protection that we had to remove as we were adults and
Mhm.
going through our own spiritual awakening process.
Yeah.
So I really love that.
And it's
Yeah.
not just because it's like parenting's almost like two arm hug. You have the love and the limit. part too. So
Mm.
it's like we need both. And I think some of it too is like there's times for protection and there's times to get involved and like advocate, protect your kid. But there's other times where it's like we are raising them to be adults in the world as well. So we
Mhm.
want there's times for mama wolf energy where it's like lick the cubs, cuddle them at home, and then nip at their heels to have them run. We have to work within, and
Mm.
that's where the intuitive piece is knowing your kid, knowing their temperament, knowing how, and having support to be like, okay, when do I push a bit more? And when they're not comfortable with it, when this isn't what they want to do, when my instinct is, because we can overcorrect if we didn't get enough, if we had things too hard one way, it's very easy for people to swing almost in defense the other way of no
Yes.
limits, or I don't want to say no to them at all, or make them do hard things because no one protected me or advocated for me, versus now how do you be there for them and then also challenge them to grow the
Mhm.
resiliency within a zone of comfort, because spiritual beings in a human nervous system, it's like part of being here in this world is some level of emotional overwhelm or trauma.
Mhm.
We don't
Yeah.
want to be the main source of it, but it's like we want them to be resilient and be like, if bad things happen in life, you will be able to get through this.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that so much. I think I was talking to somebody, actually, several parents have told me they were latchkey kids as well
Mhm.
in the 80s and 90s growing up. So I feel
Yeah.
like we had this huge
Yeah.
shift and now we have, and I don't know if that's where the helicopter mom came into play, right? Or even like the positive parenting piece. I feel like so many people have shifted into the opposite extreme.
Some of it goes too far where it's like very supportive, and like helicopter parenting is a lot of research that shows it's not helpful because
Right.
you have less confident kids, you have less
Yep.
resilient kids. Like they do need
Yep.
to make mistakes. Like we want them to know. I mean, got like some of the good enough parenting research or common
Hmm.
parenting research is responding to them about 30% of the time. And again, our intuition will know like they
Mm.
really need me right now. I need to drop things and
Hmm.
go.
Yep.
Versus, no, they're uncomfortable. They want me to drop things and go, but they can wait this
Hmm.
out. And it's actually going to be
Hmm.
good for them. And I need to
Yep.
go manage my anxiety, or what's like how much of this is my own stuff
Yep.
coming up. But again, and again, I find this is also like tends to be more of a case for women than men. There's of course going to be differences. I'm not saying all men are all women, but moms often go one way to the other where they're very soft, very gentle. There's great stuff around attachment parenting. Okay, this is why we don't do this, and very gentle. But then it can get to this point where it's like, I have told you 15 times, pick up your stuff. And then it swings
And
from gentle to like aggressive. And then the kids are scared. They do it. But then it swings back and mom feels super guilty and horrible. But it's
Mhm.
also that's part of finding that firm, the
Mhm.
mama wolf nip at the heels energy of enough.
Yes.
Sometimes it's time for a boundary, and this
Mhm.
isn't mean, but it's healthy for them. It helps reduce their anxiety, and it's help part of your own self-care, so you're not getting to the point where you're losing it, which is okay because you've said it a million times and they actually have the
Yeah.
developmental capacity. This isn't that they can't regulate, it's they're actually pushing a limit here.
Mhm. Yeah. Definitely our gifted kids that are coming in, their brains work so quickly and they are
Yeah.
on it. They're looking for those, right? Like, how
Yeah.
far can I push
Pulling the
mom?
fence, I am getting out. Yeah.
Yes, totally. I love that limit piece because I feel like so many times, yeah, we do go to that opposite, that extreme with the attachment parenting, positive parenting, those pieces, and we leave behind those limit setting pieces. I've also spoken with my son who's 9, and I mentioned to him, mom's going to support you, mom's going to help you. I'm here. Part of my job also is challenging you. And
Yeah.
I've told him I'm watching your body to see if you're ready for a challenge, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to try to choose those moments appropriately for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of my intuition that I'm using,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, and knowing those times. But also, it's part of my job to help you become an adult, and part of that is challenging you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
I've had similar conversations more at a lower developmental level for my 4 and 5 year olds too, to be
Yeah.
like, this is part of loving you, and like I know this
Mhm.
is hard, but we're gonna talk about this because
Yeah.
like I love you, I want you to have friends. We can't treat our friends like this. Even if we
Mhm.
don't want to have this conversation, like we'll have it in smaller bits, we'll thinly slice it, but like we're having this till you get it. And you're nicer to your
Yes.
friend next time we have a play date. Like, and then it
Yes.
does click it and they do better, but it's like sometimes there's stuff that's uncomfortable and they don't want to do it.
Yeah. And I love you had mentioned love and limits. And
Mhm.
in my mind, I was thinking for adults, setting limits, because that's been something I've had to learn as well. I know
Mhm.
you're mainly focusing setting the limits with the kids, but do
Mhm.
you also talk a lot about that for setting limits for mom as
Yeah,
well?
I work a lot with, I'm highly sensitive and empathic as well. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
specialize in working with mainly. And so I
Mm-hmm.
find a lot, I've even got more specialization in even personality disorders and the impact of that because I find a
Mm.
lot of the clients that I work with, sometimes there's stuff going on in their own life, and sometimes the stress level for them is dealing with emotionally immature adults that have a more kind of significant role in their life, whether it is like an
Mm.
ex-partner, co-parenting, in-laws, like a boss, because the just the stress of those dynamics is
Yeah.
so much higher than regular
Mm.
conflict if you're looking at high levels of immaturity and reactivity, or if you're getting into suspected personality disorder territory, it's like a whole
Wow.
other
Wow.
pile of chaos. I think the piece with the limits part, like a lot of it is really it's love and limits, and it's limits in service of love, because it's
Mm.
really more of a, I like some of Brene Brown's research where she was following wholehearted living people, and she had her own kind of hypothesis of maybe they're spiritual or they've gone through something, and then her research found that they were the most boundaried, and she was surprised by that.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
it's if you're really clear on this is what I allow and don't allow, and this is what happens if you cross that, not as an ultimatum or I'm angry with you, but it's okay, we'd love to see you for the holidays. There's going to be no drinking. All right, I got it.
Mm.
Okay, then you can't come. It's your choice. But if your drinking's been a problem and it's causing dysfunction at every family event, here's where we're good to see you, and here's the limit, and you can choose if you want to attend or not.
Yep. Yep. I
Yeah.
love that. And there's so much personal growth that goes in these limits too. Last night I went to
Mm.
dinner with my husband and they were trying to sit us outside because they gave away our table that we had reserved
Yeah.
inside.
Oh no,
And my
yeah.
husband said, "No, I'm not sitting outside. It's 50 degrees. Please find
Yeah,
us something
yeah,
inside." We had a
yeah,
reservation. And
yeah,
I was blown away. I was like, "Wow, normally your people-pleasing tendencies would have
yeah.
just put on a
Okay,
jacket,
yeah,
suffered." And
yeah,
I think my parents, we would have ended up sitting outside. And I was like,
yeah,
"Thank you for this. I didn't
yeah,
realize how much people pleasing there was going on in my
yeah.
life."
Yeah, and I love that because I do a lot of work with, again, highly sensitive people. I think we tend to take on too much for other people or feel really bad about things and
Yeah.
carry too much emotional responsibility for others. Where we can, if we, especially if we're respecting our own boundaries and are like not at overwhelm ourselves or out of
Mm.
patience, it's then we can set the limits in a more loving way. There's no harm in asking. And adults, we can separate that a lot easier where it's not about losing your mind and yelling at the hostess to be like, where's our table? But it's no, actually, we're this isn't really okay. This is why we ask. We can be
Mhm.
kind, we can treat you like a human being and still ask for what we need.
Yeah.
And I think that's what
Absolutely.
often what we it's that's what we want to teach our kids to do is be like, how do you
Mhm.
stand up for yourself and still be a good person? Give people the benefit of the doubt until they've really shown you otherwise. And then when do you need to maybe protect yourself or
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
love that. So I was going to shift into a different area. You had
Mm.
mentioned good enough parenting, and I
Uh-huh.
love that term. I use that term with my podcasting too. It's
Yeah.
okay, I'm going for a B level podcast here. We're getting our message
Mhm.
out there. What does it mean in the parenting setting?
More of the research about good enough parenting is kids don't need perfect parents, and there's no such thing, right? There's not
Mhm.
perfect people, but no, I'm forgetting the researcher name on it. I'd have to look it up. But it's more about good enough is like we respond enough. It's about some of the research is about if you respond to about 30% of the cues or their wants for attention. It's a relatively
Mhm.
new generation that kids get the amount of adult attention
Yeah.
they do now. But
Okay.
I think it's about again, and the work when I'm working with clients, I really more break it down to be like, I think it's a piece of as a parent or as a mom, like when your kid really needs you and you need to prioritize them, it's yes, they're the center of your world and the center of your little family solar
Mhm.
system. But there's times where it's okay if they're a little bit anxious at school, but they're okay. It's
Mhm.
you can finish up your workday and they can ride out the day and be a little uncomfortable. If it's
Mm.
dangerous and it's
Sure.
unsafe and it's traumatizing for them, it's that's a higher level of intensity and anxiety. That's okay, we got to do something about this and this needs to be addressed.
I
If this
love
is an
that.
unsafe, dangerous situation, we are not comfortable, this is really not good for them versus okay, they can handle this. If they're crying for us, it's usually our parent instinct almost knows of this is more an emergency. They really need me to drop stuff. I might need to take that day off work tomorrow, other things versus this can actually wait, or
Yep.
they're like bored and they can I can finish making dinner and they can entertain themselves, and if they want to whine they can whine. I can set a limit here.
Yes, yes. I love that. That's so perfect or perfect. That's so wonderful because we are trying to stress that perfection so often. So, yeah. What does it look like to increase presence? So, switching gears when we're having the time to sit down and be engaged, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's really not no phones away. Phones are a big one.
Mhm.
Trying not to multitask. Sometimes we have to because it's just Modern day life is different than past generations too. Most families have less and less support, usually don't have the same village. So I think it's going to be different for every situation. So I'm
Yeah.
very careful of that. Like, I don't want to shame anyone or because it is conscious parenting is also a privilege. The resources you
Mhm.
have,
Yeah.
the access to either financial support, actual practical support. I would be a far worse parent if I was in more survival
Mm.
mode and couldn't afford help or other things. I think I don't want to dismiss that because what our level of access and privilege is really going to dictate like how can we take care of our nervous system? Are we sleeping enough? Are our basic needs met? That is all foundational to be regulated
Right.
ourselves. But I think in terms of the present piece, it's more about like when are those moments that you can really connect with them. And I often talk with parents about if you can schedule your day around like when your kids are more likely to open up, like a lot of research has shown like dinner time, like rituals of connection stuff are really important. So it's like, where are those family rituals where you do have that one-on-one time? Like, is it bedtime routine, meals together when you can? It may not be every day, like morning routine. Um, Kids and teens they'll often open up more as they're going to bed, where it's like really inconvenient for parents. But if you can, or if you have the flexibility, I try to say, okay, if we can within reason schedule our own day and make spaces for this, because we can always get
Mm.
kids to open up when they don't want
Yeah.
to. But then right before they're going to go to bed, they're like, oh, this happened at school and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, finally.
Yep.
But
The
it's like, can
one
we build
moment.
that into a bedtime routine then so we have some chat time?
Perfect. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so true when they finally feel comfortable and they've let everything from the day go. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
And you're
wonderful
like, I
time.
gotta go. Yeah.
It's time for a kiss now. Good night. We don't have time to talk about it now. But
Yeah, and
yeah, I
sometimes
love
it's
that.
just like active communication. As they get older, it's not always about fixing. You can ask, even young ones, you can ask. I think mine as young as 4 or 5. I was with certain things. Some things I was like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm talking to the school or the daycare. This needs to be
Yeah.
addressed.
Yeah.
Other things I was like, do you hear some things you could try? More peer stuff that's just harmless little
Yeah.
kids figuring stuff out. It's okay, let's
Yeah.
go over some ideas. Do you want me to talk to the teachers? No, not
Yeah.
yet. Okay, I won't. I don't have to right now. If it gets
Mhm.
worse, I might have to, but so
Yeah.
you can, kids and teens really do understand limits of confidentiality. I think you can have those conversations early on and continue them into teenage years because also former latchkey kid. And I think a lot of parents, it's really cool to see a lot of parents doing things differently where they're like, as my
Mm.
kids get older, I want them to come to me to still be the
Yeah.
adult, to still be like, there's going to be times where I'm going to might have to tell people, or like we might have to get people involved here. It's not the like, for me growing up, there was like the parents who were like friends with their kids and they did whatever and they were like the cool ones. And now as an adult, I'm like, oh no, that's not. Those are that seemed so fun when you were a teenager, but not now. Or the other side where it was like, okay, they don't know what's going on. Like they're weird.
Mm.
Like they're either strict or controlling, or they're being lied to because it's not safe to actually tell them what's happening.
Okay.
Or we just don't talk about
Yep.
this. And I think, like, especially as you get into teenagehood, it's like, I want that relationship with my daughter where I'm like, I want you to come talk to me about whatever is going on. I want it to be
Yeah.
safe. Like, it doesn't mean there won't be consequences, or like, it doesn't
Mhm.
mean I won't ever tell anyone else, but there's going to be limits of safety around that because I want to help you navigate
Okay. Yep.
some of these decisions, especially when it gets more serious into
Yeah.
teenage years, young adulthood, if it's like dating, sexual activity, drug use. And I think you can start that really young
Yeah. Yeah. I
by
think.
like like not reacting, but being like, okay, sometimes we need to do this and here's what's going to happen, but giving them some
Mhm.
respect in the process.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I love the not reacting piece too. That can be challenging at times, but yeah,
Hmm.
staying a more
Yeah.
neutral party in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, that was so helpful today. Katie, thank you so much for being here. I will include everything in the show notes and I'll include your book. What was the title of
Okay.
it again?
It's F Toxic Spirituality. And then my website also does, if people want to start connecting with their intuition, it has a free quiz on there. So
Love
you can
it.
see what your dominant intuitive type might be. And then, like, right now it's set up so there's like a free 6 week challenge just with like
Okay.
some journal prompts so people can just,
Yeah.
because again, it's like a muscle. The more you pay attention to it, the more it'll start opening up.
Perfect. I am going to check that out myself. That's wonderful. I'll include that in the show notes as well for everyone. Thanks so
Yeah. Well,
much for
thank you
being
so much.
here today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in, Changemakers. This is Carrie. And if you haven't done a review for us, 5 stars and a little few words about what you've enjoyed in our podcast episodes, we would really appreciate it.
If you guys would like to ever message me, I would love any questions you have or any feedback at info@hearttoheartlife.com. We also have a brand new website, which we're super excited to share. It's hearttoheartlife.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and happy life, happy times, Changemaker families. Please remember that the information shared on this podcast is educational in nature and does not constitute licensed mental health advice. If you need such advice, you should speak with a licensed professional about your unique situation. Thanks so much, happy listeners.